Uh, all right. It's starting to regularly have these blankets on. Okay. We are on chapter 10 of the Autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. We still on this streak of doing a little bit of reading every day. So even though it's a little late tonight, still wanted to try to continue that streak on, even if it's just a few pages. Excuse me. Okay, this is chapter 10, The Expanding Struggle. On January 9th, 1957, Ralph Abernathy and I went to Atlanta to prepare for a meeting of Negro leaders that I had called for the following day. In the middle of the night, we were awakened by a telephone call from... Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, see, I did read through this already. Where is this? Let's see. Where did I leave off at? Do I do that? Okay. Let's try this one more time. When I returned to Montgomery over the weekend, I found the Negro community in low spirits. No, see, I read through this too. I read through this. Did I finish chapter 10? Oh, that's crazy, see. Nah. Wow, see. I'm messing up. I ain't had this happen in a while. I done lost where we was at in the book. Okay. All right, we at the bottom of page 105. My fault. Whoever watching this, dude. All right, here we go. It was clear that things were much better than they were before December 5th, 1955, but Montgomery's racial problems were still far from solved. The problem in Montgomery was merely symptomatic of the larger national problem. Forces maturing for years had given rise to a crisis in race relations. The social upheavals of the two world wars, the Great Depression, and the spread of the automobile have made it both possible and necessary for the Negro to move away from his former isolation on the rural plantation. The decline of agriculture and the parallel growth of industry had drawn large numbers of Negroes to urban centers and brought about a gradual improvement in their economic status. Damn, what the hell? My fault. Okay. All of these factors conjoined to cause the Negro to take a fresh look at himself. His expanding life experiences had created within him a consciousness that he was an equal element in a larger social compound and accordingly should be given rights and privileges commensurate with his new responsibilities. Once plagued with a tragic sense of inferiority resulting from the crippling effects of slavery and segregation, the Negro was driven to reevaluate himself. He had come to feel that he was somebody. This growing self-respect has inspired the Negro with the new determination to struggle and sacrifice until first-class citizenship becomes a reality. This is the true meaning of the Montgomery story. One can never understand the bus protests in Montgomery without understanding that there is a new Negro in the South with a new sense of dignity and destiny. Along with the Negro's changing image of himself has come an awakening moral consciousness on the part of millions of white Americans concerning segregation. Ever since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, America has manifested a schizophrenic personality on the question of race. She has been torn between selves, a self in which she has profoundly professed democracy and a self in which she has sadly practiced the antithesis of democracy. The reality of segregation, like slavery, has always had to confront the ideals of democracy and Christianity. Indeed, segregation and discrimination are strange paradoxes in a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal. Climaxing this process was the Supreme Court's decision outlawing segregation in the public schools. For all men of goodwill, May 17, 1954 marked a joyous end to the long night of enforced segregation. In unequivocal language, the court affirmed that, quote, separate but equal, end quote, facilities are inherently unequal, and that to segregate a child on the basis of his race is to deny that child equal protection of the law. This decision brought hope to millions of disinherited Negroes who had formerly dared only to dream of freedom. It further enhanced the Negro's sense of dignity and gave him even greater determination to achieve justice. This determination of Negro Americans to win freedom from all forms of oppression springs from the same deep longing that motivates oppressed peoples all over the world. The rumblings of discontent in Asia and Africa are expressions of a quest for freedom and human dignity by people who have long been the victims of colonialism and imperialism. So, in a real sense, the racial crisis in America is part of the larger world crisis. On the 17th of May, 1957, civil rights advocates commemorated the third anniversary of the Supreme Court's momentous decision outlawing segregation by leading a prayer pilgrimage to Washington, D.C. On that day, thousands of Negroes and white persons of goodwill from all over the country assembled at the Lincoln Memorial and had a service about 2 hours in length. We received strong and powerful support from organized labor. Walter Reuther, for instance, sent letters to all of his locals requesting them to send delegations and also money. The overall purpose of this pilgrimage was to arouse the conscience of the nation in favor of racial justice. The more specific purposes were to demonstrate the unity of the Negro in the struggle for freedom, the violence and terror which we suffer in the Southland at this time, and to appeal to Congress to pass the Civil Rights Bill, which was being bottled up in committees by Southern congressmen. In the midst of these prevailing conditions, we came to Washington to say to men in the forefront of our government that the civil rights issue was not an ephemeral, evanescent domestic issue that could be kicked about by reactionary guardians of the status quo. It was rather an eternal moral issue which may well determine the destiny of our nation in the ideological struggle with communism. This is an excerpt from Dr. King's speech in D.C. in 1957. Our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead to the federal government for passage of an anti-lynching law. We will, by the power of our vote, write the law on the statute books of the South and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. Give us the ballot, and we will transform the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs into the calculated good deeds of orderly citizens. Give us the ballot, and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill and send to the sacred halls of Congress men who will not sign a, quote, Southern Manifesto, end quote, because of their devotion to the Manifesto of Justice. Give us the ballot, and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and love mercy, and we will place at the head of the Southern states governors who have felt not only the tang of the human, but the glow of the divine. Give us the ballot, and we will quietly and nonviolently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision of May 17, 1954. If the executive and legislative branches of the government were as concerned about the protection of our citizen rights as our citizenship rights as the federal courts have been, then the transition from a segregated to an integrated society would be infinitely smoother. But we so often look to Washington in vain for this concern. In the midst of the tragic breakdown of law and order, the executive branch of the government is all too silent and apathetic. In the midst of the desperate need for civil rights legislation, the legislative branch of the government is all too stagnant and hypocritical. This dearth of positive leadership from the federal government is not confined to one particular political party. Both political parties have betrayed the cause of justice. The Democrats have betrayed it by capitulating to the prejudices and undemocratic practices of the Southern Dixiecrats. The Republicans have betrayed it by capitulating to the blatant hypocrisy of right-wing, reactionary Northerners. These men so often have a high blood pressure of words and an amnesia of deeds. That's the end of Dr. King's speech in 1957. During the summer of 1957, the SCLC made plans for a crusade for citizenship, a new Southwide educational and action campaign for the enforcement of Negro voting rights. The recently enacted civil rights law would be meaningless unless it was translated into action by Negroes exercising their right to vote. The main purpose of the crusade for citizenship was to get Negroes throughout the South Excuse me. The main purpose of the Crusade for Citizenship was to get Negroes throughout the South to exercise that right. It was my firm conviction that if the Negro achieved the ballot throughout the South, many of the problems which we face would be solved. Once we gained the ballot, we would see a new day in the South. I had to come to see that one of the most decisive steps that the Negro could take was a short walk to the voting booth. Until we gained the ballot and placed proper public officials in office, this condition will continue to exist. In September 1957, I thought it was quite regrettable and unfortunate that young high school students in Little Rock, Arkansas, had to go to school under the protection of federal troops. But I thought it was even more unfortunate that Arkansas's Governor Oral Faubus, through irresponsible actions, left the President of the United States with no other alternative. I believe firmly in nonviolence, but at the same time, I am not an anarchist. I believe it. I believe in the intelligent use of police force. Oh, shit. See? Fucking up. And I thought that was all we had in Little Rock. It wasn't an army fighting against a nation or a race of people. It was just police force seeking to enforce the law of the land. It was high time that a man as popular in the world as Eisenhower, a man with his moral influence, speak out and take a stand against what was happening all over the South. So I backed the president, and I sent him a telegram commending him for the positive and forthright stand that he took in the Little Rock school situation. He showed the nation and the world that the United States was a nation dedicated to law and order rather than mob rule. Nevertheless, it was strange to me that the federal government was more concerned about what happened in Budapest than what happened in Birmingham. I thought Eisenhower believed that integration would be a fine thing, but I thought he felt that the more you push it, the more tension it will create. So, just wait a few more years and it will work itself out. I didn't think that Eisenhower felt like being a crusader for integration. President Eisenhower was a man of integrity and goodwill, but I am afraid that on the question of integration, he didn't understand the dimensions of social change involved, nor how the problem was to be worked out. And then the next chapter is chapter 11, Birth of a New Nation. But we got a chapter down. I ain't gonna stun out you on like 7 to 10 times throughout the reading of that chapter. So I'm not even gonna try to go back on and read no more chapters because I'm gonna just end up falling asleep. But we got through a chapter. We'll pick back up on chapter 11, Birth of a New Nation, which is exactly where the book is tearing apart at. So we need to get to that. We need to get through that part quicker because this book's about to be in 2 different pieces. But we're gonna end this live how we end all of them by saying justice for Lil Mike Sago, justice for Mikey Guzman, justice for Eddie Patterson, justice for Joseph McCormick, justice for Shannon Graves, justice for Faustin Guaitigo, justice for Suzette Babler, justice for Philip Johnson, justice for Jasper Banks, justice for Jovan Fresco, justice for Mark Barmore, justice for Demetrius Bennett, justice for Geno Washington, justice for Logan Bell, and justice for Kerry Blake. We outside.